right, here we are, faced with this white piece of paper again. You don't have to be. You have choice about it. You could just start drawing anywhere, any way, anyhow. And we're going to work with not drawing things today. We're going to work with simply moving our pencil around. I guess I want to first start with a pencil. And this is a 9B pencil. You can also get these in woodless, but this one has wood like a regular pencil. And I'm going to make some lines here, and I'm going to start making really light lines, and I'm going to see if you can see those lines. So I'm going to try to make them pretty consistently connected. So I may go over this a lot of times like this, but I'm going to be light with it, and then I'm going to connect, let's say, to a curved line. And your curved line could be a little curved line like this, or maybe this is a mid-curved line, and if you want, you can go over it several times. And then I've got another straight line coming across here, straight line, and I'm going to take it all the way across. So as long as you stick with your line, it gives you a chance to be kind of considered about it, kind of play with that line and give it quite a bit of attention by repeating it. Now I've done a curved line here, so now I'm going to do a straight line. And now I'm done a straight line that's a vertical straight line. Here I've done a horizontal straight line. You don't have to keep track of this. It's not like playing some card game where you have to count the cards or count how many curves you have or how curvy each curve was. And yet it's kind of fun to keep them all connected as they disconnect, let's say, or as they connect and cross. It's not really disconnect, it's connect. It's all about connection. And in a way it's about collaboration, because anytime you've got paper, pencil, and any other medium, you're collaborating with that medium. You are using that medium. A lot of times people say, oh, I don't like this medium, or I don't like this medium. It's like, well, collaborate with it. Find out how to connect with it, how to collaborate with it. So now I've got a mildly curved line here. I've got quite a acutely curved line here. It's almost a right angle. And I'm continuing to, let's see if I can bounce this one up here and curve it. I'm making shallow curves. Nothing's right or wrong. It's something that's good to know is at this point in time, we're setting ourselves up for some success here by making it so nothing's even right. Nothing could be considered right, and in that vein, nothing can be considered wrong either. So I'm kind of playing with this, alternating the straight line and the curved line, but I'm doing it actually kind of slowly and having some fun with it. So it's a lot like doodling, and yet I'm not hopping around. I'm not helicoptering around. And I could have gone right over the top of this one. Usually I would do that if I were drawing fast, but because I'm drawing slow, I can make this one, or slowly, I can make this one curve and keep curving and go underneath over here too. So this gives you a lot of options when you can pick up your pencil, but I'm going to continue to suggest that you make your lines continuous and that you make them change from going straight to curved. Now, other people's, I can't be other people, you can just be other people. Other people's lines may be longer or shorter than mine. They may be tiny curves like that, and then a straight and a tiny curve. And so it's fun to not only alternate the straight and the curve, but to change the directions that you're going and to change the scale of how long it is in between a straight and a curved line. Like here I could go with a longer line like I did here and then come in with another curve. Now don't worry when you get smudges going on here, because you don't need to take them off right now, but if you wanted to, you can always clean things up really easily with a kneaded eraser. if you find that this part of your hand starts getting really dark from going over stuff, then just, take a little break and go wash off your hand. So this is a kneaded eraser that I'm using. It's the only eraser that I use. You can use any eraser you want, but I like it because it doesn't leave little crumbs and it doesn't tear up the paper. So this is what it looks like when it comes, and this is what it looks like once it's out of the package. Now this is probably 3 or 4 of them together. I kind of like to have it, a bunch of it, and then I can see it. I don't lose it. All right, so I suggested we do this lightly, but I haven't done it totally lightly. Done it a little bit hard. You don't always have to. I could have stopped right there, but I can also come around past there. I can go back to that area. This is really where you make your own choices. You follow your own ways. You learn to make your own decisions. So here we are playing around. And again, I really, really advise, at least on the first time that you try this, that you make this line a continuous line. It can pretty much go anywhere you want. Now, if I close it here, I guess I could pick it up any place I want, right? Because we really didn't see the disappearance of the line. So I could pick it up any place, but again, any place that I pick it up, I'm continuing from something that already exists. And that is going to give some consistency to my work, to what I'm doing, to what I'm laying out here. Now that is something, that's a term that used to be out there, laying out. Things had to be laid out. All graphic design had to be laid out. And it kind of still is, but we lay it out on computers, and that has so much more mobility to come and go than the layout of newspapers every week or the layout of a business card. All that was done by hand. And so here and everywhere, you can still call it laying it out because you're laying things down and deciding on positions. Deciding on positions. Now you might find that you're deciding in way different ways than you usually decide things. You're not weighing out the pros and the cons. You don't have to know where you're going. In fact, it's good to kind of just go there. It's like hiking around your paper. Just take a hike on your paper and make all kinds of trails. Now, I did not reformat this paper, and if you watch some of my other videos on YouTube, you're going to see that often I choose what the height and the width of my drawing is going to be, what's going to contain the drawing. But today I'm using as much of the paper as I want or don't want so that I really can hike the entire mountain range or the whole desert. And then later I'll figure out if I want to cut some of it off or not. I'm going to do a fast straight, fast curve, fast straight, fast curve, fast straight, fast curve. Oops, another straight. Whoa. Now, another thing that we're learning here to do is to never feel like you can make mistakes. Like it's all good. All good. All good. So I'm letting things roll just a little bit more so I give you yet another feel for how this can feel. Now once we've done this with the pencil, we're going to make the sometimes used by artists such as the late former California artist Richard Diebenkorn, and many Venetian artists also use some kind of a different medium underneath their work to make black marks on the canvas. Here we are underdrawing. That's a new term for me that I picked up someplace recently at an art symposium or someplace like that. At an art museum, I'm just going over it, tracing over it, which is great. That's a great way to get to know it. It doesn't all have to be traced over, but here I am just pretty much tracing over, I guess, the things that I want to trace over. So one of the things I'm suggesting that happens here that I'm not necessarily implementing myself right now is that you start to choose larger forms that have been made out of these straight and curved lines. And I'm going to choose and kind of combine forms into a bigger form here. Now, any of these forms could be collected, let's say, like brought together and made into one form. But right now, I'm now kind of going over some of these other lines just because I want to lay down some charcoal throughout. But what I've decided to make my biggest form here, and again, to me, this isn't really again because I haven't mentioned this, but I'm thinking of this not so much as I am thinking of it as being spatial, but I'm thinking of it as stacking like pancakes, the biggest forms or the biggest shapes all together on the top, and then letting the smaller forms be ones that stick out underneath this. So to me, these guys are all sticking out underneath, but another thing I can do here, and you can always add something if you want, as long as you're starting where you're connecting. And of course, my rules don't have to be your rules. Okay, but I am going to see if I can connect up this form somehow. So right now I'm going to probably come back with my pencil, and I also have some colored pencils that I could come back with. Now I could also make some of these forms that are underneath smaller by taking some pieces out of them, like that. Taking some pieces out of this, making them, they're still going to be kind of big just because their outer shape is big, but I'm going to play with them in a little while in a way that makes things either come forward or go back, just like it does when you look at it in the real world. I can now gather everything that I've made here and kind of make a notation as to how it's going to, all this is going to collect together. And what I'm going to do with that, I'm going to kind of take the easy way out here because yellow is such a light color. And I'm going to go ahead, and before I do anything with my oil pastels in the next segment, I'm going to make a note here with my yellow Prismacolor, and I'm using Prismacolor. It's not the only pencil on the market that's a soft colored pencil, but you want to use a soft colored pencil. You can see how I don't have to press very hard with this. And this is not the time that I would want to press hard with it. It's not the time that I would want to put a layer of heavy colored pencil down and thereby change or obliterate the texture of the paper. But now I've made a note to self of how I'm going to gather this as a big piece and maybe use some of these smaller pieces as additional details on top, these smaller shapes. So see here, I'm going to come in here and the way I'm thinking, I'm going to grab this shape, and then I'm going to further grab it. First I outlined it to grab it, and I'm going to further grab it by giving it a colored pencil once over so that I see it that way. Now this thing might end up being a different color, and I just have an undercolor, and then maybe I'm going to come over it with more of the Prismacolors, or like this. But this would be getting way ahead of myself right now. Sometimes it's good to to show you how you might be getting way ahead of yourself. On the other hand, you might be making some notations that are very, very important for you later. I'm going to put this underneath here, this underneath here. And so I'm trying to find some kind of logic to how I'm breaking up my biggest shape here. And all of this could be done faster if you don't have a lot of time. And sometimes it's good to not have a lot of time when you're doing art, because that way you'll work faster, much faster. And you'll make decisions sometimes that are really good decisions because you kind of just made them really fast. Now, I am starting to really pick up a lot of smudgy stuff, but let me show you this. It really doesn't matter because I'm going to keep changing this, and this is going to be these kind of bones underneath that are just the lightest, tiniest little petroglyphs that show where I may have gone before. They're not going to be more than a ghost-like indication of things that I've done before. So I've worked with the pencil first, and then I've worked with this vine charcoal, which by the way is extra soft vine charcoal. This will stay out of your way later. It'll make it so that you don't get frustrated with the vine charcoal kind of digging into your paper or not being able to smush out, because you can see how much I can smush this out. And with the soft charcoal, then you're able to really clean it up more easily than any of the other charcoal cleans up. Now, that's not to say the other charcoal doesn't clean up. I kind of like this. This is another thing you can do, is you can end up drawing with your kneaded eraser. You can make even more of these ghostly-like, shadowy type things. Have different kinds of definition as you play with it. So get messy, get into it, and make more decisions. One of the things that's hard on the first time you do one of these, you should really think of it as only the first time you're going to do something, because I'm going to show you in just a bit where I'm going to go with this one, and then you'll show yourself where you're going to go with your first one. And then based on that one, you may make other decisions differently. You may layer this all differently. You may start it differently, but this is an idea of a way for you to start drawing without having to pre-think what you're going to do. And I think that's always a good thing in any case. Often it's a great way to start, but one of the ways to not pre-think and then think later is to not pre-think, then do, then find out what happens. And that's what I call playing what if. What if I do this? What if I do that? And so the first time through this entire process is a journey into finding out what will happen, what could happen, really, because every time is going to be different. And that's the beauty of working with actual materials and working with your hands. You're really uploading, downloading, layering into your brain a lot of possibilities that you can literally draw on later, whether consciously or unconsciously. Sprinkling colors around is a great idea too. So as you watch me do this, you see that I'll take one color and kind of spread it like breadcrumbs throughout, at least for now. Like I said, again, we're going to be covering things up all the way up, because when in the next segment the oil pastels get into it, they will definitely move right on top of anything that I've got going there right now. So they're waiting in the wings.
It was whispering, telling me I ain't never been no better. Crystal ball.
So I'm back now, and you could be back on something you did before, or you could have just done this all in one sitting if you had you know, some time, depending on how much time you put into it. But again, I used some fine charcoal, and I used, the first time I did all continuous lines in order to make this image that I made. And then I came back in with charcoal to decide what I wanted to gather into one big piece, and then how maybe I wanted to gather smaller pieces so that I could have something big float on top and smaller things be back behind it to create some kind of overlapping and distance. And then I started playing with the colored pencils. Now this just becomes a lot of fun to work with your color pencils, work one direction, and then, as I'm doing right now, maybe another direction, so that you end up experimenting with making texture, making no texture, changing the color of things. I can just come right in here on top of two other greens that I already have with the red, and then I can come back, and so I could just play on top of here with some decent paper. I have a piece of Bristol, of the vellum Bristol is what I'm working on right here. And so there's just lots and lots of things that can happen here that have to do with color mixing, being able to draw lightly. I'm actually drawing lightly. There's tons and tons of time to go in and start drawing really darkly with the color pencil. And if I don't want to draw really darkly with a color pencil, I can come in with something that really puts down a lot of material at once, and it's actually oil-based, so it's kind of a segue into working with oils, even though you're not going to have the problems of bringing out oil paints and all sorts of stuff. And it's relatively dry already because you can see here it's not all oily wet. You know, there's nothing wet about it. You can use anything you want to use to do your work, but for my purposes here, I am going to take away all of these browns and black. I'm going to leave some white just in case I want to mix with some white, but if I want to mix with some black or do black lines, I'm going to use this time the vine charcoal. So I am dispensing with all of that, and then I guess I'll leave all the other colors because it's really fun to use them. If I'm going to make all these browns, can't really make silver, so maybe I'll save that for Christmas, the gold and the silver. But if I want to mix browns, I can mix browns, and that might be where I had to bring in either some more of the vine charcoal or some of these darker blues and so forth to get it to go to a darker color. So that's my thoughts on color, always starting lighter and going darker rather than marching right in with a brown that you could have otherwise worked up to mix and would have had more control on the brown. The other stuff I've got here right now is I call these bristle brushes. Looks like Blick calls them bristle brushes too. They're right here. I like these little flat guys. They're little compared to big brushes. Maybe this seems like kind of a big brush. And Blick's calling this one, the big one, an 8 and the small one a 4. You wouldn't have to necessarily buy a certain brand of brush. But you do want it to perform well. And you kind of want it to be where this comes to not a point because it's a flat brush, but that these are cut like a haircut, where they're cut so that they taper in like this. I don't know if you can see that tapers in, but it does. It's not just a bunch of really flat random bristles sticking out the end. So getting a decent brush is good. Now, why do we have brushes for oil pastels? Well, you can use them once you get a lot on there with either the gamsol, which is a clear mineral, odorless mineral spirit, and it's probably the least toxic, the gamsol brand. You can use other ones if you're not using it in a school situation. And in a school situation, if I wanted to introduce oil, I would introduce baby oil. So I don't know why I've picked this pink, but the first thing I want to show you is that it's awesome to get a lot of oil pastels down. And the other thing that they do that can be kind of cumbersome at times is they kind of put out little pieces. There can be little pieces of them that kind of curl out of here. And you can take and push those back with your finger like I'm doing. Just go ahead and push that right down with your finger, and I think that's probably one of the best things to do. It's possible, even though this is so dry and so forth, to use a brush or to use a paper towel or something like that. You can see that I'm now taking up some of what I put down and revealing the color pencil underneath it. So I'm going to just go across here. Now I have the option of just putting this pink back on here again and not having as much of my undercoloring, my underdrawing. In painting, they call it underpainting. When you paint something kind of purposely another color underneath one color, or you purposely paint even the same color underneath, but it's going to be the underpainting. In other words, it's going to be more layers over the first layer, and the first layer is called the underpainting, and really any portion of the subsequent layering in oil paint that you would do would also be underpainting until you get to your top layer, and then that would just be considered the top layer. And often many layers simultaneously show through. So we're playing with that, and that's an oil painting concept that's being introduced here with oil pastels. And the underpainting concept has also been introduced ahead of time with the Prismacolors. Now, one of the things that I'm going to show you right now, just so you get the idea of what the setup is I'm going to bring the gamsol over here, and I have quite a bit, and maybe I'm going to put more of it here with another color. And this is the great thing about either any painting or any drawing with oil pastels or with Prismacolors or any of the Prismacolor type soft pastels, is that you want to really encourage yourself, and if you're teaching, you want to encourage your students to combine colors, to get out of the idea of putting one color in one place and not feathering other colors into it. You want to get students and get yourself to augment your color so that it moves, because when tonal value, meaning the light and the dark, change in a painting or in a drawing, that's when the qualities of space and form come into play. It's one of the major ways that we look at a flat surface and see it as being more dimensional than it was when it was just plain paper. So now again, this is going to introduce some brush techniques. You see, sometimes I'm going back and forth like this. Other times I might go like this, meaning across here, okay? Excuse me. All right, I do have some water that I'll be careful not to use for other things, like pretend that it's the gamsol and drink that, or use the water when I think I'm using gamsol, so excuse me for that. But it does bring a good point, which is you want to really make sure that your area is clear of food and drink and so forth when you're working. Okay, I'm not digging very hard in this, and I will say that I found something that was a little odd that surprised me, and that is that some of my students, when I introduced the oil pastels, they thought they could put them down, I guess, lightly like this, like I am right now, and that somehow the gamsol or the baby oil would help it smear out like watercolor. And that's not true. Only watercolor is going to really flow out like watercolor. Again, different materials are different. I guess the idea that we all had brushes and so forth, but made them think with the gamsol, the turpentine-like mineral spirit, that it would really flow out. And it can flow a little bit if you've got a lot of oil pastels down. So if you do get a lot of oil pastels down, it might flow a lot, but I'm using the gamsol just to kind of settle the oil pastels down. And also the oil pastels feel a little bit like a blunt instrument to me, especially the student grade one. But even when I'm using expensive oil pastels or oil sticks, they still make the edges kind of rough. Now, I'm not against a rough edge, okay? But I also like a smooth edge. And let me show you something here that can happen with this smooth edge. And that is that I could go in here with the charcoal, this soft vine charcoal, and I could get a really kind of tight little edge there. And I could come in and feather that in again like that, okay? Or I could just leave it like that. But what I'm liking about coming back in with the lines here with the oil, with the charcoal into the oil pastels, not that it always gives you the line that you want, because you are going over an oily surface with kind of a dry, sort of chalky surface, but it's also, even with this soft oil pastel, and it would be possible maybe to use even a harder one, might even push some of the oil pastel away, but the soft one gives you a chance to come back in here and get something that you're otherwise not going to get with an oil pastel, which is a darker line. So if you want to come back and get darker lines, you can do that additionally with the vine charcoal. Now here you're going to see something, and that's that it doesn't always want to go, but you can just keep playing with it. And that's a lot. Another thing a lot about oil painting is sometimes you just really tease the surface. Now coming in here with this very light peach color is not going to do much on top. And this is something, while I'm mentioning that you can assume with the white being just tiny bit lighter tonal value, meaning the lightest there is, white, is doing a little more than the peach, which, especially on top of this blue, tends to desaturate even more when it mixes with it. And that's all it's going to do at this point, is mix with it. So I don't know that I would develop this area quite as much as I am, but I just wanted to show you what, I wouldn't develop this area as much as I am all at once, possibly. You could do whatever you want, but I want to show you what a lot of these options are with the oil pastels, with the brush, and then coming back in also with the gamsol and the brush, and also with the soft charcoal, which is vine charcoal. Okay, so this is how we can develop this. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about here was that big things come forward and smaller things go back. And the biggest thing that I made here, and I'm going to continue to make it, I started making it with the Prismacolors, but I'm going to come in here now with the oil pastels and continue this line. And the way I set this up with this straight and curved line idea, and making all these small things inside here, which I want, the way I did that, I'm ending up using a big fat line, not a big fat lie. I'm going to try to tell a big fat lie, which is that this comes forward and it's not all sitting on the same surface. That's one thing California artist Wayne Thiebaud says, is that we as artists are all telling a visual lie. He says we're telling a visual lie. And we're trying to get the viewer to believe that there's something sitting here, whether it's abstract, which it is in this case, or realistic, or some combination thereof. We are, now watch it, you're going to be speeding up on the slick surface. So, whew, that goes fast. Okay, so we're trying to make the viewer really have an experience, and a real experience usually involves, even if it is abstract, the feeling that something's closer to you and other things are farther away from you. And one of the nice things about working abstractly is you get to see this as if you're viewing it with me right now, standing over on the other side of my paper. And in just a little bit, if I can do it without upsetting my entire setup here, I will also turn this around so that you can see what I see. And this is not only to facilitate that, this turning it around, it's also because it's great to work it different ways, especially when we're talking about deciding what to, this is how I've been seeing it, when we're talking about deciding what we want to have come forward and what we want to have go back. I'm going to leave this all textury here for a minute, and I'm going to go in and kind of quickly, this is not the best word necessarily, but for me I use it. I use the word dump down or kill off. That's the word that came to me, was kill off. So I'm not sure that you want to use that, but I'm going to, fancy word, art word, lower the intensity, or sort of a matching fancy word that means somewhat the same thing, if not exactly the same thing. I'm going to desaturate. We're going to have not a saturated color in the stuff that I want to push back. So I'm basically wanting to push everything back, so I'm coming in with this peach color and letting things blend. And I don't have a lot of really dark stuff, and even if I do have kind of this dark thing, I could, horror of all horrors, bring a little bit of white in here, because that is going to be the thing that's going to take your value, your tonal value, and cut it down too. That would be another thing you could do, is just say cut down the color. The color needs to be more subdued. Another word, it needs to be more faded out. Another word is it needs to fade back. So this is what we think about when we think about getting rid of really intense color. And I'm taking the easy way out, as I mentioned, but this guy just caught me here because I'm using a peach on top of a pink. So what did it not do? It did not introduce an opposite color, and I'm going to use one that's already fairly desaturated, which is this olive. And by bringing the olive in on this peach, you see how this becomes less of a pink, less of a saturated color, and more of what people tend to think of as mud. And people freak out about mud. But this is colored mud. This is good mud. And you need to have muddy waters. You need to have muddy oiled areas. You need to have muddied color, because that's what fades out. That's what takes a back seat. Now this is kind of a blue, so that peach, where I'm being a little bit, just taking the easy way out, would work probably pretty well on it. Here's one of the things that happens sometimes, is that two colors together become darker. It's most prevalent with red and green. The red and the green, if it's kind of a mid red, in terms of tonal value, in terms of the tonal value. And a mid-green, they pretty much are the same value, but, oh, this is so fun because this is like coming up where there isn't blue, and so it is getting, it's pulling forward. You all see how that wants to pull forward there. And one of the ways that you can always push things back, not using color and tonal value, is with making it very clear that this overlaps that. You see how I'm coming back in, but again, I'm now going back in and using my outline crutch and my dark crutch to say this is here, and thus this very dark thing, darn it, is back. So I'm not sure if that's convincing you, but this is the type of dialogue you have with yourself when you're doing this. What are you pulling forward and what are you pulling back? Pushing back, pushing back, pushing back. So you're pushing things back and pulling things forward. And this, as you can see, with using paintbrushes, whoops, almost went into my watercolor water I have sitting here and didn't come into my mineral spirits. This takes longer, but produces some fairly dramatic effects using this brush and also using the oil pastels on top of the colored pencils. I'm going to work this whole area if I can. So I'm leaving this green a very out of the tube green. I'm not using tubes, so we'd have to actually say out of the oil pastel set. This is the green that came out of the set. When this dries, and even before it dries, I could bring other greens in here to change that, to change the color and thus change possibly some of the value. Desaturate it a tiny, tiny bit, but the same color is not going to desaturate. It's the opposite colors or colors further away on our friendly color wheel that are not as near and dear to each other. We're not as same. We're more opposites. And when you combine opposites, you really cut it down. I have to say, I have so much fun just playing with these tools because this is almost like a chisel, the way it's coming in, and it's making a surface. A lot of attention to surface. And that is another thing that I want to mention here, and that is that as students of art, as people who make art, get better and better, their surfaces, whether it's in drawing or painting, but particularly in painting, when they start becoming aware of doing these underdrawings, underpaintings, having things show through, making things that are a little bit more textural, making things that are more transitional, meaning that the color transitions, and maybe even the tone, the value transitions. It goes to darker in some places. Here you can experiment a little bit with scratching back, and here we're using a little bit of the paper is showing back through, and the underpainting that was there before is now showing when I scratch it back. Conversely, I'm going to go and find my black here. I could make the edge of this possibly slip under this more by bringing, and I'm using oil pastel now, not using the vine charcoal. Could have used either, but I felt like the oil pastel might be a little bit more reliable in holding itself on the surface, there we go, of this green. So here I am teasing that across there, and if I want it to come further across, then I need to put more in there. I can darken one edge here, and that may pull it forward. It also may make it seem from your view as it's leaning, as if it were leaning back in. These are the things that you're wanting to feel that have to do not only with placement position, but position or placement, really position, and tendency to tilt or to overlap or to round a corner. And this all comes from playing with the tonal value and the saturation. Is it highly saturated as it is here and it wants to leap off the page, or is it less of a color, less distinct, more faded out? Use the art terms, which are awesome to use, but you want to have them linked to something that is experiential for you. And so you want to say that when you, my words, jump it down and push it back, you do that by combining colors, but not combining like orange, red, and yellow, which are all going to kind of hang together. You go introduce their opposites and muddy it, make it less clear, because you've added in colors that are not analogous with them, that are not the same as them, that are not like them. Analogous and analogy are very similar words that mean something that's like something else. So when you put like with like, it hangs together and stays a little bit more saturated. Never as saturated as when it's the pure color. So what I want to do here is just go ahead and finish the whole piece. And it's not where I have to make it all oil pastels, but I like using the oil pastels because of the way they capture the surface, the way they are strong on the surface. You notice back here that this is a fairly saturated color, but it's tinted, meaning color and white. It's tinted with the white of the paper coming through it. When the white of the paper, let's see, this is red, so we're going to grab a green, and maybe we don't want to grab the darkest green, we'll grab a lighter green. We can take this down. The first thing it wants to do is kind of burnish it, and that's, if you don't know that word, you should look it up, because a lot of working with oil pastels and colored pencils sometimes, especially the softer ones, have a lot to do with burnishing the surface. In other words, you change the surface. It's kind of like you polish the surface. You polish the surface. You make the surface more regular and sometimes almost more shiny. So it turned it to a brown because it had been a pink underneath there with the Prismacolors. And here's another pink like that I'm going to bring in with a green, and it's going to turn it to kind of an ochre color. So again, it turns it to more of a neutral. So another thing you can say is that you neutralize the color. Neutralize this color by mixing it with this color, because a pink is really a red and this is a light green, and so they'll take them down to a more neutral. So it's neutralized. So the things that are close to you are very vivid, just like they are in your life. Very vivid. And the things that are far away are hard to remember sometimes, and they're hard to make out, and they're not as easy to see. And so that is the desaturated color, the faded out color. And now, because this is one of the things I think is easy with the brush, is just to get rid of these crumblies that the oil pastels tend to do. I think I want to bring some green in here just to do something that is kind of green to complete this green thing that I have going all the way around. So now I'm dealing with yet another kind of principle. It's something that you might see most notable in some ways in Van Gogh's Potato Eaters. Impressionist Vincent van Gogh, potato eaters, and that is that there's a lot of heads, there's a lot of people eating potatoes around a table, but when you make them all kind of similar tonal values and connected, and that's what we first started with this, is using connected lines, then it's very easy to start to group them with like tonal values and like illumination, so that let's say the 10 people sitting around the table come together. They don't physically come together as people, but in your drawing or in your painting or in his drawings, they are touching each other, and then they can function not only as separate shapes but as one big shape. So this is something that you definitely want to think about, is where you want to have your color contrasts and where you want things to feel like they come more together. I would never have that be the only thing I'm thinking about, but it's a huge thing to think about. And when it comes to color, one of the things that's not always as easy to grasp, maybe it's very easy to grasp, but sometimes I find people don't think about it that much, and that is the saturation of the various colors and how they then work together, what the relationship is of the saturated colors to the unsaturated. Like this is a pretty saturated color, but when it sits here, I'll probably have to bring in this colored pencil, but when it sits there, I don't know if that's the color, next to this, the relative saturation, this highly saturated color makes this seem much more desaturated, much more of a neutral. So I like that. It depends a lot of times on what it's next to. And do you have to remember all this? No. You have to work with it. And then sometimes when you're at the end of a painting or a drawing, or even at the beginning of it, it depends when you feel like taking a more analytical look at it. You might get back from something, turn it upside down like I just did with this, so that you could see it this direction. And then that's where you can start to evaluate for yourself what's coming forward, what's standing out, what's sticking out, what's jutting out, what seems like it's in the background. Like hopefully this seems like it's in the background. This really teaches, without loading a brush, it really teaches how to use a bristle brush. And the thing that's nice about the bristle brush, and the reason you want to use this bristle brush, is it has muscles. It has the ability to be shoved. I could shove stuff off of here. It's all nicely mixed on here right now, so you're not seeing the evidence of it being shoved off. It pretty much can't be shoved off, but it will smooth out. So here I just have the colored pencils and layers of red and layers of green, and you can see that with color pencils I can also come in with a gamsol mineral spirits, and I can, they're odorless by the way. That doesn't mean that you should work with them without ventilation. It just means that you're not going to smell up the room, or if you're working at a school, smell up adjacent rooms or anything like that with the odor from it. So I'm just letting that merge more together, meld more together as I come around this outside, and I'm eliminating the higher texture of the white showing through here. And I've demonstrated quite a few things all at once here, and now I'm coming back in and letting the little crumbs fall down. I want to be a little bit aware of not just blending everything, although I think I might have just done that, so that I do have, if I want it, the texture of the white of this paper showing through along with my green. Now, I have a lot of places where you see through to the process, to the layers, to the construction, through how it was all put together here. Let's see what happens over here. I have some green on my brush. I could have gotten the green off my brush with a paper towel, but I want to see what happens when I just use the mineral spirits here with the, see, here's an example of how without enough material, meaning without enough colored pencil here, it doesn't do what it does when you have lots of the oil pastel or lots of the colored pencils. The thing I like about this is it's, because it had bones to start with, because it had its straight and curved lines to start with, and because it was very connected, even though it had a lot of different contrasts with it, it all holds together. And when you come back to working on something like this, let's say you just have 20 minutes twice a week to work on something like this, you'll come back and it's already well composed for you, and you're ready to tune back into it and continue to work on it. So it's something that you could work on over a large period of time, a long period of time. Now sometimes you can be in here getting all blendy and doing your thing and stuff, and then you realize, like when I come here, maybe I should just leave that like that. So there's things that you might want to leave till later, even though you're kind of unifying everything and enjoying working with your brush in a situation like this, as I am. But you're always watching. You're always watching for what's happening and making your decisions based on what's happening at that time. I'm going to further work to push the rest of this back and to continue to pull, let this come forward. And I'll be using both my oil pastels, and in areas that I haven't drawn yet, I'll also use more Prismacolors if I feel like it. I haven't gone in here, for instance, with any gamsol yet, and I haven't gone in here with any oil pastels yet. So I can continue to work that with a light touch that continues to intensify the color if I want it to, depending on the color I pick in these areas. I guess one of the things that some people might want me to mention is that when I put the red next to the green, it very much makes the two of them come alive, and that's because they're opposite. A pure red has no green in it. It has no yellow and no blue. None of the primary color red, meaning a color that cannot be mixed. Can't mix two colors and make red, so that's why it's called a primary color, as are blue and yellow.
It was whispering, telling me I ain't never been no better. Crystal ball. You could search the world over and then again, never come closer than the day you began. I that's 'cause the answer you already hold. There's only one place if you want to know. Listen, it's whispering. Yeah, it's telling you. Ain't never been no